For this section, we'll be creating a project that we use throughout the various parts. So let's create an ASP.NET Core web application. Let's call it simple usage. And we'll call it simple usage app. And once this gets created, we're going to select web application for those Razor page content files. Leave everything else as default. So .NET Core 2, .NET Core, no authentication, configure for HTTPS, do not enable Docker support, and we're done. So hit create. And there we go. So now we have our standard Razor page system. In fact, if we run this, it should run once it restores everything. And when it does, we'll have just that basic Razor page layout that we've seen before. Let's make sure it does run. It does. Simple usage, home, privacy, welcome. It's all here. Okay. For this first video, let's just look at how the HTML is laid out so we kind of understand how we can create things on our own. So let's open up Shared. And the layout page is a great page to look at for examples because of the fact that it actually uses a lot of different things in here that you might want to use in other areas. So I encourage you, if you ever get stuck somewhere and want an example, just go to your layout page and look there. You might find it. The first thing we see that's really of importance or is a little different is this environment variable or tag. So environment is not something that we normally see in an HTML page. And in fact, that will not actually be in the finished product. Instead, it's a C# directive that says only include this section if it's in development. So whatever's inside the tags, which happens to be this one link right here, will get included if we're in development mode. This one down here, environment, says exclude development mode. Essentially, it's an if-else statement. And that's how you kind of lay it out. So if we're in development, we use the local bootstrap.css file. If we're not in development, meaning we're in production, then we first go to Cloudflare and look for Bootstrap. If we don't find it, there's a fallback, which is that Bootstrap CSS locally. So that's how we can actually set up first of all, a CSS that's in the cloud but has a fallback in case it's missing or it goes down, but also how we can then use just the local version for testing. Think about it for a minute. If you were on a plane and you didn't pay for the very expensive Wi-Fi, then you couldn't work on your laptop on a site because the CSS would be missing if you were pulling just from Cloudflare. But because you have this development flag here, it pulls from your local when you're in development. Makes it much faster, easier to debug, easier to check things out. But when you go into production, you want to have that Cloudflare version because it can be cached on the client's machine and it's just faster and it takes some of the load off of your server. Okay, so that's the first interesting thing is those environments and then also the link with fallback for your CSS. Also, you can have it for JavaScript or anything else. Okay, next, if we scroll down here, we'll find the anchor tag. Now, in the anchor tag, we have this ASP-area right here. And ASP-area, we're not going to use, but essentially you can group your website into different areas. And then that's when you indicate here, okay, this is the project area, or this is the customer area, and then have pages underneath that go with that specific area. We're going to do one big area. But next is ASP-page, and it says /index. Well, this is actually not a direct path. Instead, what it's saying is find the index method or the index page at this level. What that means is if I were to go over here and rename index.cshtml, this layout would update to reflect that. So even if I gave it a different route, it would still know it's looking for that index page and find it on the correct route. So it's pretty, it's more future-proof than hard coding a path to a link. So this way it can handle and survive some of those renames or path adjustments, those type of things that otherwise might break a whole bunch of links. So definitely use the ASP-page whenever you want to link to one of your other pages, your other Razor pages. Now, another thing to note, and it's not really a Razor specific thing, but this is using the newer Bootstrap 4 layouts. Okay, so if you're familiar with ASP.NET MVC, that by default uses ASP.NET Bootstrap 3, 3.3.7, I believe, is the default, but it can go up to 3.4.1 or something like that. But once you go to 4, then it kind of breaks things because of all the layouts are all Bootstrap 3 specific. Well, these are Bootstrap 4 specific, meaning that you're on the latest version of Bootstrap and you can get a template that is Bootstrap 4 and bring it in and put it over top without issue. Okay, down here, that @render body I've pointed out before, but that's an important one because that's where our code, for example, from index.cshtml, the HTML of it goes in where render body says it should, right in this spot. So just note that that's there. Okay. And then down here, we also see that environment include development and environment exclude development do the same thing for JavaScript that it was doing for CSS. It's bringing in the Cloudflare versions that are cached and are faster than our server. And it's falling back to the on-prem. That you would use this in more than one spot. Well, that's what this is. And it says cookie consent partial, which is right here. So it's taking this HTML and C# code, and it's going to compile it, of course, and insert it in where it said partial on the layout.cs HTML file. Okay. Now we're going to cover what this cookie consent is in a future video. But essentially what it is getting the user's consent to store cookies on their machine for our site, which is actually a really cool new feature. But what that indicates is just how easy it is to bring in a partial view onto a page. You just say partial and then give it a name. And that brings that code in this spot. Now I keep saying code, and part of it is HTML, and HTML is not code. HTML is markup. I do know that, and you should too. But when you're talking about Razor pages, it really is kind of code because of the fact that you're mixing C# and HTML. So just want to point that out real quick. Okay, so what does this all mean for you? Well, first of all, you've got a great template to look at when you're saying, what should I do or how should I do it? For example, you want to know how to use a link? Well, there's an example right there. If you want to know how to do a partial, it's right there. And so a lot of the basics you'll be using and some more advanced stuff are all on this page. There's a lot of uses you can come up with for your environments where you can say, I want to include or exclude development environment for this information. Maybe development environment gets a whole nother menu section for debugging your web application on the server itself or something like that. Just be careful when you use those development. This one actually makes me a little nervous. This bringing in the CSS locally only in development and having it fall back if you're in production. The problem with that is that concerns me at least is that this bootstrap.css is not necessarily the same as this bootstrap.min.css. They may be a little different. Because yes, this is 4.1.3, but what if we decide to upgrade and we change this to 4.2? I'm not sure if 4.2 is out yet, but let's just say 4.2. Well, did we also upgrade our bootstrap.css file locally and make sure it is 4.2 as well? So that's where it can kind of get out of sync. And that makes me a little nervous because you could be modifying things depending on a certain version of Bootstrap or a certain version of your JavaScript file that has changed in production. So just be careful of that. It is a good system, but it does mean you have to be cognizant of it, be aware of it, and understand that you really can't upgrade one without the other. Make sure you keep the two in sync. Otherwise, you set yourself up for a dangerous situation.